Hello and welcome. I'm Kate.
And I'm Emily, and this is Beyond the Neurotype,
A podcast that explores what it's like to be human affirming, regardless of labels, considerate of every person's individual needs, and allowing us to, ideally, understand what is behind every individual's actions, choices, and needs.
We do this with curiosity and love as we explore these individual and unique experiences that are rich with challenges, growth, and grace.
I'm Kate, a mental health social worker and synergetic play therapist. I'm the co-founder of the Village Therapy Hub. I'm a mum to 2 adolescents, and I love understanding and exploring what is happening beneath the surface for children and adults, and what behaviours are communicating to us. But let me keep it real. Much like yours, my life is a roller coaster. So I also understand the complexities of being a carer, the challenges of the day-to-day, and I won't pretend it's all enjoyable.
I'm Emily, a neurodivergent mum to a beautiful autistic girl and wife to a wonderful autistic man. I'm passionate about celebrating neurodiversity and creating a community where people are seen, held, and loved for who they truly are. It is my hope that as you listen to the stories of our beautiful guests, you feel inspired, validated, and supported in your journey.
This podcast is recorded on the land of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. We offer our heartfelt gratitude to the traditional custodians and elders, past, present, and emerging, for continued opportunities to learn, reflect, and grow. Charnee is someone I have admired from afar for a long time, and I'm very excited to finally have an excuse to have a proper conversation with her. She grew up overseas in Hong Kong and England before coming back to Australia at the age of 20. She's a teacher, a mum to 3 young children, and a late diagnosed neurodivergent woman who stepped into her power since receiving that diagnosis. Charnee now runs a practice called the Neurodivergent Educator, and spends her time empowering the neurodiverse children and young people she works with, while also educating families, teachers, and communities on understanding and supporting the neurodivergent children in their lives. I can't wait to have her share some of her passions, special interests, and thoughts. Welcome, Charnee.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
We've been having a little pre-conversation around some of those special interests, and so I'm extra keen to get going on some of them because you've got so many incredible insights and thoughts. One thing we've been talking about is your experience as a teacher and the fact that you educate your classroom constantly around the experience of neurodivergence and teach through the lens of what works best for neurodivergent children. I'd love to explore that. Is that what you've always done? You know, how did you get to that place? And what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I guess to answer the question, is that what I've always done? No. Sadly, it's not. I wish that it was. When I first started teaching, I think like any job, you go in with a very narrow exposure. I went into teaching having been at school and then been at university and continued to be a student through university, and then going back into the classroom on the other side of uni, fully qualified, and then going, oh, I'm in charge now of this class. And so you tend to do things the way that you were taught to do them. Now, I was going through uni. I graduated from my teaching degree in 2010. So, we're talking quite a long time ago now. And the way that things were done, the way that things were taught, and really, to my knowledge, the way that they still are. I mean, inclusion and neurodiversity is not really something that is integral to the teaching degree, unfortunately. Certainly in early childhood degrees, they talk about child development, and there's a lot of that side of things, which I think is so important. But when you're doing a primary or a high school teaching degree, that side of things is actually not included. I remember doing one unit of study at uni that was around inclusion and disability. And essentially, we just had to pick one of the students from our pracs who had some kind of diagnosed disability and then almost do like a case study. And that was the sum of it. It was like, yep, tick, this person can teach students with disabilities. And everything I've since learned about inclusion and various types of disabilities and human development, the brain development and all sorts of things, none of that was actually taught in my teaching qualification. So in the early days of when I started to teach, no, I didn't do it the way that I now do it at all, not even close. Very curriculum focused rather than individual student focused. Differentiation was a buzzword, but really, I guess I didn't have a concept of what that meant at a human level. It was just, oh, student X can't do this level, so I'll create my lesson, I'll pitch it here, and I'll differentiate. So students who are doing well, I'll adjust it up, and students who are struggling, I'll adjust it down, but I'll always pitch it there and then do the adjustment. And I think really that's how inclusion is done. And I use this inclusion with the fingers rather than, actual inclusion, because I think that's how society sees it. So accessibility is an afterthought rather than universal design where everybody can access it all of the time anyway. And that it is, I guess, fundamentally the difference in terms of what I do now versus what I used to do. I also used to use things like behavior charts and rewards and class dojo points and things like that. I wouldn't be seen dead doing those things anymore. I recognize the harm. I remember the harm from when I was in school. But those things are so prevalent and certainly were so prevalent back when I started. So no, I do things very differently now than I did then.
Can I ask, sorry to cut you off, but I want to ask this before we keep moving on.
Yeah.
Is your way of choosing to support the kids in the classroom, like not using dojo points and not using behavior charts, is that supported in your school? Do teachers have the capacity to make individual choices around these things? Do other teachers look at you and go, what are you doing? Like, culturally, how does that work?
Yeah, look, I can't speak for every school. I can only speak to my experience, but I've taught in several schools. And for the most part, there will be an overarching behaviour policy. A lot of schools are PBS, PBL, positive behaviour for learning. And that's things like, be safe, be respectful, be a learner, right? But I mean, those are all really things that we should be doing anyway. But most of them will have some kind of reward system, whether it's little paper tickets and the kids get a certain number of those and then trade it in for an assembly award or whatever. But within your own classroom, the teacher they can use their own discretion. So in my experience anyway, I've never had a supervisor or a principal say to me, Charnee, what are you doing? Like, where is your dojo points? Or where is your, like, no one's ever said that to me. It's kind of like, no, I trust your professional judgment and you will manage the behavior in your classroom as you see fit. And as long as your way of doing it isn't causing problems that I have to deal with, you do you. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, I've always found that my supervisors and principals have been supportive of the way that I approach behavior management.
Which is a really encouraging thing if we think about people just individually, and I guess teachers in this case, but teachers individually expanding their knowledge, feeling into how they want the classroom to, feel for them, and actually being able to step into that without it being a really prescribed decision by someone beyond them in hopefully more cases than not.
Look, I mean, I think a lot of teachers, I understand that people have had positive and negative experiences, particularly when there's a lot of school can't. Maybe parents haven't always been happy with the way that things have been handled in particular instances. I think having been on both sides, I have children in school. I've also been the person who's trying to manage and juggle the conflicting, like one on top of the other, the cumulative needs of a classroom full of children, and that is no mean feat. So I think we have to come into it with this idea of, I've literally never met a teacher who got into the role because they wanted to lord it over the children and they enjoy making children miserable. I've never met ever an educator who got into it for that reason. So we have to come at it from a view of, teachers, I think fundamentally are trying to be good people, do good things, and raise good people. Okay. But we're also human, and we are the sum of our own experiences. If we've never been shown another way to do it, maybe we don't know. Each school I've been at where I've shown people, I still use Class Dojo, but I do it this way instead. And I have so many fellow teachers just go, oh my God, I'm going to do that next term. I'm already in this term, I'll finish it off, but I'm going to start that next term. I love that. I never thought to do it that way. Thank you. Thank you for the idea. So I think it's just, we've all had those students, and even our own children, where we go, oh, it's really hard to get that intrinsic motivation. They don't seem to want to do the thing. They need the carrot on the stick kind of thing. I struggle to get them motivated to do the thing. And it would be lovely to think that everyone could be intrinsically motivated all of the time. But even in our own jobs in the adult world, there are times when we go, just don't feel like doing this. There's no incentive, there's no reward, there's no dopamine. And so we need something to get us through. Now, in the adult world, we can accommodate ourselves. We can go, you know what? I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go have a coffee. I'll get some dopamine from my coffee. Then I'll come back to it. Our children in schools don't have the ability to do that. So we are trying to push them uphill and not actually give them the accommodations that we have in everyday life. And so much of the time, that's what I hear from teachers, from parents who go, I understand, Charnee, that I need to accommodate. I get that. Accommodation. But what about when they get to the real world? What about when they grow up? The real world won't coddle them. It won't wrap them in cotton wool. It won't do that. And I'm going, what's it going to be like when they get to the real world? They are going to thrive because they won't have to ask permission for accommodations. Because asking permission for an accommodation is a barrier to accessing that accommodation. And in so many of our neurodivergent children, you might as well not even have an accommodation if they have to ask to access it. Because by default, if they have to ask, you could say no. And for many children, particularly highly anxious children, pathologically demand avoidant children, highly masking children, children from trauma backgrounds, children who don't have the language, children who are not given space or the ability to be able to have emotions at home, because any kind of negative emotion is like, no, I'm not tolerating that. Go to your room until you've settled yourself down, right? These children won't ask because asking means you could say no, you could refuse, right? So my answer to what will it be like in the real world when they grow up is so much better. It will be so much better because I accommodate myself. You accommodate yourself every day without having to ask.
Yeah, it often occurs to me that we expect so much more from our children at school than what we actually expect of ourselves as adults. And to sit in a room with 25 plus other children all day, and the noise and the distraction and all of those things, having to ask to go to the toilet. I don't ask my boss if I can go to the toilet, all of those things. I think we forget that we're actually asking them to cope in something that we probably couldn't cope in ourselves now as adults.
No, imagine that's your job and you were in an office environment with that level of constant noise and distraction and people putting hands up, and you're getting into a flow of work and your supervisor comes in and is like, right, team meeting, like constantly, but I'm just like, as adults, we wouldn't tolerate those kinds of working conditions. And yet we are thrusting children at 5 or 6 years old into essentially what is the equivalent of a full-time job. It's 5 days a week for 40 weeks a year, and we thrust them into it at 5 years old. And if they see it through, if they see it through to year 12, we're putting them into a job they didn't choose that they can't quit for 13 years. And it doesn't make sense. It sounds ridiculous, but that's actually what we're asking them to do. So I feel so strongly that, and my practice is to make, I essentially have the approach of, I treat my class and I run my classroom as though every student in there is neurodivergent. Okay, I know they're all neurodiverse because that's the nature of society, but I treat it as though everyone is neurodivergent. Okay, because the reason I do that is because if they're not neurodivergent, but I've run things in a way that is neurodivergent friendly, that is accessible, that, it sort of incorporates the principles of inclusive design, it's not harmful. It won't take anything away from them. It won't diminish their experience. It won't give them fewer opportunities. It won't impact their learning negatively. But the opposite is not true. And there are so many neurodivergent kids, many of whom are undiagnosed, who are highly masking. And I'd love to say that my neurodivergent radar picks up every single one, but I'm certain that there are some where I haven't even clocked onto it, So if we offer these accommodations as a matter of course, then children are free to take them up or not take them up as they see fit without having to ask. And there may be so many students who would benefit from that, but they're not visibly in distress. And so it doesn't occur to offer. So if we make these things available to everyone, those who need them can do it. Those who don't need them will leave it.
Amazing.
And I love that, Charnee. I talk to a lot of families and parents in my work, and I say the same thing about parenting. I have a lot of families come to me that might have a child that is diagnosed and a child who's not, or that they're just not really sure, and I always say the same thing, that we will do no harm by parenting through the lens of neurodivergence. If you think your child has anything going on, even if we don't know what that is, let's look at how we would parent them if they were neurodivergent and start to incorporate some of that stuff, because it is the most likely to help them build success and to also help everyone feel safe, and feel okay in that environment. So,
and then you also avoid, in terms of that parenting piece that you're mentioning, you also avoid then that concept of, it's not fair. Why does my brother who's autistic get to do X, Y, Z and I don't get blah, blah, blah? Like if we are parenting everyone as though they are neurodivergent, we can then, of course, there will be differences, and we can then talk to, there are different needs, like fair doesn't mean the same. It means everyone's getting what they need to be successful, and we can have those discussions. But I think you're right, having that very black and white, well, this is my autistic child, so I'll parent them this way, but I won't do that for my neurotypical, or as far as I know, neurotypical child. Why wouldn't you?
Love to know more about what exactly that looks like, in terms of how you've adapted your teaching to be neurodivergent friendly.
Yeah, look, absolutely. That's fair too. Thank you. Because I guess I get caught up in this, this soapbox of like, we need to make everything inclusive, and then I forget to give concrete examples. Look, I think there needs to be an element of, as I said before, it's little and often. So rather than going, hey kids, today, gather round, we're going to come and have a talk about neurodiversity, I think it's things about, like I use myself often as an example for the kids. And depending on the age group and that sort of thing, I won't always necessarily use labels, but I'll give you a personal an anecdote. So I was teaching a stage 1 class, which is year 1 and 2 composite, and it had, I'd been on the class for maybe 6-7 weeks, and I have a tendency, as many neurodivergent people do, executive functioning and so on, to a kid will put their hand up, I'll be taking a swig from my water bottle, and my brain goes, oh, kid needs help. So lid goes back on water bottle, down it goes, wherever is the nearest flat, empty surface I'm nearest to. And then I go help that kid. And that's all that my brain can do in that moment. I'm then searching for my water bottle, can't find it, or I would put my teacher lanyard down somewhere because, whatever, it was in my hand instead of around my neck because a kid needed the key for something or other, or my hat or my whistle or whatever. And so I actually sat the kids down and had a conversation and said, hey, guys, listen, I need you to know something about me that maybe will make it make a bit more sense to you. I could really do with your help to be my little helpers, my little detectives, because Mrs. Gregson's brain is always a little bit busy. I have so many different things going on in my brain. It gets a bit noisy in there, sort of like how noisy it gets in here sometimes when we're all talking at once, but it's like that inside my brain. So I tend to put stuff down and go do something, and then I forget where that thing is. It's not because I don't care about that thing. Sometimes it's something I really need that's really important, and I get so upset that I've lost this thing. But unfortunately, that's just what happens in my brain. So if you guys could be my helpers, and, if I say, okay, can anyone lay eyes on my water bottle? It would be so helpful if you could just point me in the direction, or if you see something that is mine and it's lying in the wrong place, just go and pop it on my desk. Like anytime, just go and pop it on my desk. That would be so, so helpful. And it was so nice to have that conversation, because what then happened was I had the kids be so empathetic and so like, oh yeah, like we are noisy sometimes. Oh, that's what it's like inside your mind. Wow. And I think, talking about the fact that it's not that I don't care about that object. It's not that, oh, it doesn't matter to me. It does matter to me. I'm trying my best, but I'm just trying to do everything all at once. And I then had a 7-year-old pipe up and go, oh, do you know what? It's like that in my head too. And I always lose things, but that's because I have ADHD. And I said, you know what? I do too. That's exactly why my brain does those things. Everybody can put things down sometimes, but if it's happening as much as it's happening for you and me, then we have a name for it potentially, but yeah. And then I had other kids who didn't have diagnoses, who I had my suspicions about, but who didn't have diagnoses going, oh, I do that too. Oh yeah, no, well, that's okay. We can all just help each other and that sort of thing. But, it was a conversation that wasn't pointed. It wasn't about like, you're the reason, okay, this has happened, let's come and have a talk about it. It was just a human to human interaction, which gave language to and normalized this internal experience. And I wasn't the one who brought labels into it, a student was, and that's fine. We can talk about the labels, but I think that's so important, because when kids are young, they don't have these agendas, they don't have these stereotypes, they don't have this prejudice. And that early in the piece, in year 1 and 2, if I can catch them and give them a real life concept of a picture in their mind of what ADHD is, what it looks like, then later, as they get older and they hear some of those other representations that maybe are not so generous, they have something already in their mind to be able to question that and go, well, that's actually not how I understand it, because my teacher back in year 1, she had ADHD and, she didn't go, ooh, a squirrel all the time, so I think we need to give them these concrete examples. So that's part of my approach, was just anything that I struggled with as a human, I would be very open about that and share that with the kids and explain to the best of my ability my internal experience and give them the language for that. Because whether they go on to get a diagnosis, whether they don't, it's important for them to know that this is within the realms of human experience, But then there's day-to-day things, okay, so there's curriculum adjustments that I make all of the time. So it's things like, if I'm doing circle time, if I'm giving verbal instructions and I want the kids to come down, I will every time, or just about every time, I will have a discussion around, okay, everyone, in 1 minute, I'm going to be giving some verbal instructions and I'd like everybody's attention. Now, if you can, I'd like you to come down onto the floor so that I don't have to make my voice go as far, okay? If for some reason you can't, that's absolutely fine, all right? And the phrase "you do you" was always in my classroom. You know, you do you, that's fine. But I'd be like, you know, they'd come and they'd sit down. I'd be like, okay, make sure your body is ready to learn. What does that mean? Well, your body will be ready to learn when you are comfortable and you can concentrate without distracting someone else or being distracted by someone else. So you sit however is comfortable for you. And then there would be, you know, from time to time, not every lesson, but there would be explicit teaching. Okay, so we would build on that. But it would be, some of you might want your legs crossed. That's fine. Some of you might want to stare at a spot on the carpet because it's distracting to look at my face. That's fine. Some of you might want to wiggle your foot up and down, so you want to sit on your chair, and that's absolutely fine, as long as you are comfortable. If you need to stand, that's fine too. Please make sure you stand at the sides or at the back of the group so you're not blocking anyone from seeing, you know, but it's kind of just that explicit, everything is fine, and here's an example of what it could look like, you know. But in terms of curriculum adjustments, it's actually really quite easy. I think there's this idea of trying to make the curriculum and make your teaching accessible and assess things is so much work, you know, so much additional work. And really it's not. It's about flexibility, you know. So it's things like, I had a beautiful little student who was minimally speaking, okay? And I had to assess his phonemic awareness and his literacy level very differently than I did for students who participated in that traditional reading group style thing, with the small groups and you're reading orally and everyone takes a page. He was not able to participate in that, and that's fine. But that meant that it's on me to make sure that I'm assessing him so that I can report accurately on what he actually can do, you know. If I assessed him in that same way, he was going to get a limited in terms of the mid-year report. And he wasn't limited, you know, but if I assessed him, you know, it's that kind of, you know, you've seen that picture online of, if you assess the fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its life thinking it's a failure. It's that concept. So I had to put my thinking cap on and go, okay, well, how am I going to accurately, hand on heart, say, I assessed this person fully and this is what they are capable of? And actually it was really easy. So it was things like, you know, instead of reading one-to-one, because, you know, I tried in small group, that was a no. Very early I found out that was a no. Didn't really like reading one-to-one. He loved using iPads and technology. So one way I was able to do it was I could send him into the quiet room, and he knew how to use the camera on the iPad and like prop it up against the wall and have the camera facing him, and he could record himself reading things. And he was able to do it when he was on his own. Okay. But I've had other students who were not able to do that because they, you know, didn't have the oral language. They weren't able to do that. They, you know, situationally mute, various other things going on for them. So I've printed out one of these to hold up as an example. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, if at all. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so something like this, beautiful, beautiful, because you can use it in so many different ways. Now, this particular child, I would argue that this is actually more complex because he didn't actually write it. He held each of these in his working memory, which, as we know, is an executive function skill, which can sometimes be challenging for us ND people. But he held it in his working memory and was able to go, well, the cat starts with C, the lion starts with L, the apple starts with A, the pig starts with P. So he would just look at it, take a moment, and then go, clap. But if I had a student who was not able to verbalize it in that way, or who had working memory issues, I could very easily adjust that by laminating it, and getting them to write the letters one by one. If they had fine motor issues and they weren't able to actually hold the pencil, or that was too difficult, their muscle fatigue, their core control, whatever, I could provide them with magnetic tiles with the letters and they could put them one by one, you know? So all of these things are ways to measure their phonemic awareness. And I was able to accurately reflect in that child's report, yep, he's working at, he is exactly where he needs to be. He knows what he needs to know. But if I had have assessed his reading ability on oral reading, you know, he would have got a really low grade. And you think about those students who consistently get low marks on, and by the way, I should say, I know that's not like all of literacy. I did various other things to test comprehension and so on, you know, but it's one example. But you think about those students who are trying their darndest, but assessments are not accessible to them. And so they consistently fail, or limited. And the impact of that on your self-esteem, it's little wonder they start to have school can't and go, well, this is too damn hard because I'm trying so hard and I'm still, in the eyes of the teacher, I am failing.
You know? Or even I'm being assessed and I feel like even if I'm being assessed and the teacher's saying, oh, that's great, well done, good job, and they never see their reports and they have no insight. They know that they're not doing the assessments the same as the people around them. They can see that, you know, they sense that.
Exactly.
So to have this sense of success,
yeah,
you know, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And I had, you know, I've had a number of students over the years who had a lot of difficulty with speaking and listening tasks. So, you know, and that's all the way again through from kindergarten through to year 6, where they had to do a speech or they had to, you know, practice for a little, read a poem aloud, whatever it was, and do it like a presentation in front of the class. And I've had a number of students who, for various reasons, simply couldn't do that due to really significant anxiety, you know, and look, for the most part, most kids don't like it, but there are kids who the anxiety is like next level, you know. Yeah. So can I also say, in terms of adjustments, every teacher in educational institutions is bound by the Disability Standards for Education, which came out in 2005. But if you actually look at that in, like, on the Department of Education website, and I know that there's different departments in different states, but the disability standards is nationwide. One of the suggested adjustments for these children is to be able to record their speech and have their teacher watch it. That's actually recommended as an adjustment by the Department of Education. But there are so many teachers who either aren't aware of it, who are going, no, it needs to look like this unless you have a diagnosis. You can't just say, I'm nervous, I don't like it, whatever. Well, why? So I would give my students the choice. How would you like to present it? These are the parameters, and we would go through. I would put the marking rubric on the board. We would, I guess, dissect it. What does that mean? What does that look like? I spent a lot of time talking about the eye contact one for speaking and listening tasks. I had so many students who had no idea, you know, and I understand why, because we're very literal thinkers a lot of the time, but who had no idea that when, as a teacher, I am marking, I'm not looking to see whether you lock eyes with every individual person or with me. That what I mean when I say eye contact is that you appear to be generally, you know, glancing across people, and that your face isn't down like this. That's what I'm looking for. And if you give the appearance of looking up, I will give you that mark. That's what it looks like. Now, how can we achieve that for people who find that hard? And then we would talk about different things. So, you know, for students who couldn't do that because, you know, they were struggling in terms of the working memory and needed to reference their, you know, their papers a lot, I would, you know, I have at times been like a teleprompter, or, you know, that scene in Love Actually where they have the thing and the guys, you know, putting the cards back, and I would stand at the back and I would have these pieces of paper and I would, you know, one at a time, because that was able to help them be able to get up, face up, project, and be able to get that eye contact mark and the voice projection mark that took into account their abilities,
And such a reasonable accommodation that, again, in the real world, you would have.
Well, newsreaders have teleprompters, we don't expect them to look at it and memorize it or have it down on the desk in front and do this constantly. These are standard accommodations in the real world. So, we need to be offering that to kids. And like I say, so I would offer the kids, this is what I need, as long as I get this, these are the criteria I'm marking against. I don't mind what that looks like. If you need Mrs. Gregson to be your teleprompter, I will do that. If you want to record it, we will do that. If you want to, if it's so nerve-wracking being in front of other people, you can go in the quiet room, which is off to the side of the classroom, and we will stream you to the whiteboard so that we can all watch you, and that sort of, like, whatever you need to be able to do this task,
There's two things I love about this. Firstly, again, that idea that they get to feel success in, being assessed and doing the task, but also that because the options are always available, I might, the first time we do a presentation to the class, I might feel like it's not within my capacity to be in the same room. So I'm going to move myself out and I'm going to do it that way. But the second time an opportunity comes up, I might think, actually, I kind of saw how other people did the teleprompter thing. I might try that. So instead of someone deciding what I need as my differentiation and always putting me outside into the other room and saying, oh, Kate always needs to go out there when we do an oral presentation, every single time I get to step into what do I feel like I need right now, and I might try. And even if I try one and it's not working for me, I'm going to say, oh, miss, actually, I've changed my mind. This one's not working. I'm going to try it that way instead. And that's going to be okay, because that's how we want these kids to be in the adult world, is able to test things out, try them, step back when it's not working, but dip a toe in if you feel like maybe it will. Like, it's just, and this is often what I find, is that differentiation is made, decided, and then set. It's like, that's what that kid needs, and that's then the decision. And then if the kid does start to show success and someone looks at that and goes, okay, they don't need that differentiation anymore, it's often, oh, they don't need that anymore, so let's just bring them back to the typical assessment. Like, there's no shift in the differentiation. It's that or that. And then these kids are like, whoa, hold on, no, I'm successful because,
Yeah. And I think, that's such a common trap as well, is, oh, they had all these accommodations and now they're doing well, so they don't need them anymore. But sometimes it really is, like, number one, our capacity fluctuates. So some days I need those and other days I don't, and it isn't linear. So just because I haven't needed it for the last 3 weeks doesn't mean I won't need it 2 days from now, But I think there's a psychological element there too, of the safety net. I may not use it, but knowing I could helps me to push through, So we need to be really careful to, as you say, to recognize that the reason I'm doing well is because I have access to these accommodations. If you take them away, I won't do well, or I will, but at what cost? The distress to me, And that's where we start to experience, a lot of school can't, is, well, I appear to be doing fine according to my friends, my teachers, everyone, but at what cost?
Yes.
What I love about what you've just talked about the accommodations being open to everyone, it really removes, I suppose, the shame or the feeling different to access those accommodations. And thinking of my own child who is autistic, and she's now in the upper years of primary, how she appears to her peers is very, very important. And she doesn't want accommodations because she doesn't want to be weird or seem different. And so I think creating a culture around normalizing accommodations from a young age in school is so important, so that when they're in those upper primary levels, when it's your peers and what people think of you are becoming, more important in your life, that you're used to accessing those and not having to ask all the time, that asking is a lot easier.
Yeah. And I mean, things like there's some beautiful NeuroWild resources, on Teachers Pay Teachers, that sort of thing. There's the self-advocacy cards. So, sometimes there were years where I had a number of students, particularly in upper primary, and it's as you said, who don't want to be singled out, who don't want to be the kid with the accommodations. They just, they want to fly under the radar. And that's fine. It's not about shame or, I'm embarrassed about this. It's just, preteens and teenagers, that like there's natural self-consciousness. So it's like, I know that I'm allowed to do XYZ, but I don't want to have to ask, and I don't want to announce it, and I don't want everyone else to know that I'm doing XYZ. So in the example of those self-advocacy cards, print a set out for everybody. If everyone has access to them, if everyone has them, on a toggle attached to their desk, then, the ones that don't need them will leave them hanging there or scribble on them or, do whatever they're going to do. But the ones who do actually want them, it's not singling them out if everybody has access to them. And that's, there's so many, I guess, and again, it's not in the spirit of shame, but there's so many, I guess, really subtle accommodations that we can give to people that preserve their dignity and their autonomy. So I'm even thinking about lots of accommodations in terms of toileting. Okay, I've got had a number of students who, for whatever reason, struggled with toileting. Now, it would be around things like, sometimes there were interoceptive differences. So they didn't know they needed the toilet until they were bursting. So how do I make it so that those kids can go to the toilet, just run out the door and go, so they don't feel embarrassed and have an accident? I make it in my classroom so that if you need the toilet, you don't have to ask my permission before you go. You can go. Yeah. Or, it might be, like in a younger year group, it might be that there's a buddy system. Grab a buddy and go. Like, doesn't matter. They can take their friend by the hand and they run off to the toilet together without announcing it to me. Whatever. That's fine. So I make it like that for the whole classroom rather than only for the kid that needs it. Oh, you all have to ask, but if Johnny needs the toilet, he can rush out without asking. That's how I other Johnny. That's how I make it seem like, well, what I want from the rest of you is the norm, but Johnny can't do that, so he has access to this other thing. No, don't other people that way. Everyone gets access, but Johnny may have an additional accommodation that the others aren't aware of. Maybe Johnny has sensory issues where he can't use the normal, like the student toilet, because, maybe the smells, the sound of the echoing, maybe there's dripping pipes in there. Maybe he has trouble being perceived by others, and there's that sort of unnerving sense of someone could come in at any time. So maybe, in addition, Johnny also has an accommodation where he gets to use the disabled toilet or the staff toilet. No one else needs to know about that. That's Johnny's business. Maybe Johnny also has in the staff toilet that he uses, maybe he has a pencil case where he keeps, a change of underwear and pants or shorts or something, because maybe Johnny has trouble with his interoception and that happens a fair bit and he needs to change. He has the dignity of not having to call somebody in, not having to, have a bag of wet clothes. It's a pencil case. No one would know. It can stay there, So some accommodations can be universal and some can be privately agreed between yourself and the student and their family.
I really want to speak to what I hear a lot when I have conversations like this is the kids will take advantage of it. They'll just leave. They'll just run out of the room. I won't know who's going where. They'll leave because they're bored, not because they need to go to the toilet, blah, 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 blah. I would really love to hear your response to that.
Yeah. So look, I think, as teachers, it doesn't take very long for us to get to know the kids who always go, together. And, oh gosh, every time those two people go to the toilet together, like there's water all over the floor or the soap dispensers get emptied or whatever. And I think rather than go, oh, well, I'm concerned that people will take advantage or do the wrong thing, and so I'm only going to offer it to people who have earned it. I think it's that innocent till proven guilty thing. offer the accommodations to everyone, and troubleshoot the problems if and when they arise, and come up, it's the Ross Green, it's, the CPS kind of, like, collaborate with those kids, have those discussions. Hey, I've noticed that this is happening. What's up? What's going on for you? I'm worried about this. You're worried about this. How can we problem solve this so that we both get what we need? And it may be that, hey, I don't want you going to the toilet with that buddy. You can choose from these buddies. It might be something like that. Various sorts of things. But equally, I've had other students who, particularly, I'm thinking of a couple that I had from trauma backgrounds who really struggled with various things, academic things, but also the psychosocial stuff. And if we would do group work and things like that. And I had started to notice that every time we were doing group work in maths, we were breaking off into group work, he would disappear to the toilet. So number one, I'm going, if he is using the toilet to have a break and coming back regulated, no problem in my eyes. I don't care what you do in the toilet, and again, as an adult, if I need a break for a minute, I might make an excuse like, hey, I just need a bathroom break, or I'm just going to go get a glass of water. You don't know if I'm really doing that. Maybe I'm going and screaming into a pillow. But if that's what I need to do and I come back okay, it's nobody's business. But number two, it gave me some feedback to kind of delve deeper and go, what's going on here? And so I was able to look at the way that I had organized my groups and go, okay, experiment a little bit with this particular student is having trouble with the social dynamics of breaking off into groups. So how can I then change the way I do things in my class to make it so that he doesn't have that kind of that freeze response of everyone's getting into groups around me, no one's inviting me, oh, I'm always the only kid left over, So as a teacher, I take that as my cue. What's going on? What can I do to support?
I love that. And I just feel like I can't let this go. I have to go back and mention this. But when you talked earlier about, giving everyone the cue card so that they can, and that some kids won't use them and some kids will, it got me thinking about the kids that might be neurotypical or might generally not need accommodations, but might be having something going on in their life that's causing things to feel really hard in that moment. And the information that you would get from them suddenly using the accommodations or suddenly showing an interest in needing and accessing extra support, and just how powerful that would be because those kids, the kids that have something going on in their outside world, they often slip under the radar, and no one notices anything about them until things have gotten really, really hard. And so regardless of their neurodiversity or not, or whatever, wherever they're at in their neurodivergence, they would be able to flag that. And I just think that's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it reinforces that idea of neurodivergent traits are human traits. There is nothing that is particular to autistic, ADHD, OCD, like dyslexia. There's nothing that is particular to any kind of diagnosed person that is not a general human behavior. The difference, I guess, we're talking, because then we start to get into the slippery slope of, well, then we're all a little bit autistic. No, we're not. So it's the intensity, it's the frequency, and it's the impact that those behaviors have on your life. Okay, as you guys know already. But yeah, I think it's important for a couple of reasons. So number one, as you say, it helps us to go, oh, this person's capacity is maybe impacted so that they're needing to lean on accommodations that they don't normally. What's going on? So from a well-being perspective, it's really important. Another thing to look at is whether or not they use those accommodations, those tools, those adjustments. If they have access to them and they know others do, then it's not a shock to the system as they get older or potentially into high school. It's them kind of growing into people who have been exposed to people using various accommodations. It becomes not other to them anymore because they were there. I could have used them, but I choose not to. But my friend Sophie used them, or, you know, Johnny over there, he does it, but only sometimes, or whatever. It's this responsibility we have as teachers to make sure that our students know that within society, some people might need extra or not extra or support or tools or whatever, and they might need them all of the time, some of the time, none of the time, but we expose everybody to them, you know. And there shouldn't be, you know, on that, there shouldn't be any earning them either. You know, you can have a sensory break when you've done 3 more sentences or whatever, because if I'm at the point where I'm acting out or I'm asking for a movement break, I'm actually probably already past the point where I needed it. So if you want those 3 sentences, the break might allow me to do it, but withholding the break will not. And even if it does, the quality of those 3 sentences you get is not going to actually be reflective of what I can do. So from an educational standpoint, there's actually no benefit to that anyway.
I'd really love to know how much support you've had from the schools that you're in, or as teachers in general, from the departments of education, how much support in education and providing accommodations you actually receive. How are you as teachers kind of educated and these accommodations modelled for you, or are you bringing your own experience? Obviously, you are bringing your own experience into the classroom and modifying yourself, but what kind of support do you get from the schools in general in order to do that? Do they kind of offer this to every teacher in terms of teaching you about what accommodations kids need, or?
Look, it's not where it needs to be, but it has improved in recent years. So most schools will have, you know, learning and support teachers who, you know, their whole role is about learning support. So it will be, you know, I guess managing and looking at what those students' behaviours, what their diagnoses are, maybe coming in doing observations, you know, running little groups, whether it's initial lit or, you know, some kind of maths kind of program. They may also be responsible for extension opportunities as well, because that's another form of differentiation, is extending too, making sure that everybody has what they need. But, you know, so schools will have somebody who is in that role. And of course, as part of that role, they have access to the learning and support teacher network, and they will have different kind of professional development opportunities, which they then will bring back to the staff. And often, say in staff meetings or staff development days, there will be, I guess, learning for the whole team of teachers in the school that is around, okay, we're going to do, you know, so-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so went off and did, you know, some professional learning about dyslexia and how to support that in their class. They're going to put together a presentation for the rest of us to kind of show us what they learn and give some ideas and that kind of thing. A lot of schools also have have another position. There's an AP position where they're kind of the assistant principal of curriculum implementation, APCI. So they will come into different classes and kind of look at the group of kids that you have, and that's teacher directed for the most part. So we liaise with them and say, hey, I'd really like, you know, I get an hour with you a week in my classroom. I'm really struggling with literacy groups. I feel like I'm doing well with my, you know, my middle and my bottom group, but I feel like I'm having trouble extending that top group and really, you know, giving them like some good meaty stuff to get into. I'd love for you to come in and, you know, then maybe we do some team teaching where we kind of, you know, bouncing off each other, or maybe you take the other 2 groups and direct those ones, and I do, you know, the top group and just give them some one-on-one time, or vice versa. Maybe we get a third teacher in if there's, you know, a casual for the day, that kind of thing, so that they teach the other groups, you teach the top group, and I observe. Maybe you take my whole class and I go and observe a teacher next door or somewhere else in the school who I've identified does that really well. So there's a lot of professional learning. But it's up to us as individual teachers to go, where could I upskill? where is it most beneficial to me as a professional and to my particular class of students this year? And it will differ year to year, of course, because sometimes I'll have classes where I think I'm all over it, and then a kid will come in, or a group of kids will come in, and I go, wow, I feel like I really need to upskill in this particular area. So it's up to us as professionals to identify, where can I go to look for professional development courses, to look for other colleagues who do it really well, and then approach, the APs and so on to kind of organise to go and do an observation, that kind of thing. Now, the departments of education in general also have online resources. So there's, there are hubs of information online on the intranet and that sort of thing, to be able to go, okay, here are some general great resources for differentiating in literacy, in numeracy, for inclusive classrooms, here's some sensory information, etc. But again, that's up to us as professionals to, we're told that it's there, but it's up to us to go there and to kind of look at it and pick out the bits that we need. So there's a lot that's left to us as professionals, which in one way is fantastic, because it's nice to have that autonomy and that trust in our professional judgment. But in another way, sometimes there's such a volume of information available that you don't even know what's out there, and you can get stuck in this rut of, I don't even know what to look for. Maybe I've got this student who is demonstrating these particular behaviours, and I don't know enough about sensory sensitivities to recognise that that's what's going on. Maybe there isn't a diagnosis. So I might not know to go and look up some information from the Learning Hub about sensory sensitivities and what I can do in my classroom. And that's where hopefully the learning and support team would be able to point me in that direction and give me some resources and support me. So it's very much a network, a whole team kind of approach.
And that's leading into what you were saying about the autonomy that you have and how great that's been for you in terms of being able to adapt your classroom. I suppose you can also look at the double-edged sword of that, is that teachers have the autonomy to not provide accommodations and things. And I suppose that concerns me a bit, just from my experience and my friends' experience with neurodivergent children, is often I find well-meaning and lovely teachers, but often lacking some of the basic information as to what accommodations are actually out there. And personally, for me, I would love to see more coming in from a department level and flowing down into the school level, that it's kind of a, heavily mandated and, you have to provide these accommodations, or, but also without then taking the autonomy away from the teacher to, put in these awesome changes that you have. So
yeah, I mean, what I can do too is briefly share my screen maybe, because often in my professional development webinars, I sort of come up with, these little visuals to kind of go, hey, these are things we need to leave behind, things we need to not be doing anymore. And then obviously there's a discussion around, well, why actually are behaviour charts harmful? And it's there's so much in that, but it's all around the fact that it doesn't actually take into account what's going on for the child, the emotional distress. It just tells them to stop doing that particular behaviour. But from a professional perspective and my experience, I can tell you, particularly as I said, in those early days where all of my colleagues and all of this, I used behaviour charts because that's what I was taught to do, and if they worked, why is it the same kids always at the bottom and the same kids always at the top if behaviour charts actually were effective? They're not. It's that simple. But all of these sorts of things are, they're all really very ableist, and they're not hard to get rid of. There's actually no need for any of these types of things. Whereas I can bring up in a moment an example of some ones that I do like to offer. So I shared
For
this
people that couldn't see that visual, it was things like behaviour charts, repeating messy work, isolating due to poor, responses,
Yeah,
fairly
apologies. I
typical
forgot
kind of
that.
stuff. No, I was just also filling time while you brought up the next one.
Yeah. So it was, whole body listening, that 5 Ls, like legs crossed, lips closed, hands in lap, that sort of thing. Missing out on fun activities as a punishment for something that they had done previously, or something they had failed to do. That ultimatum sort of thing. If you don't finish your work, then you're not going outside and going on the play equipment with us. That kind of thing. Planned ignoring, withholding sensory items. That sort of thing. Whereas the very, very simple kinds of accommodations that I recommend and offer to all students, things like, I don't care if they wear their hat indoors. I know that sounds really, really benign.
Oh no, as a parent of a child who needed to wear their hat indoors, I wish that had been allowed. That was the biggest trigger, and the most amount of phone calls I received were as a response of what had happened when the hat had to be taken off.
Yeah, but why does the hat need to come off?
Yeah. That's
does
what I
that
used to
really
say.
matter? Does it stop their learning? Does it stop their engagement? What is it in you as a teacher that causes you to feel so disrespected by somebody keeping a hat on? That's a you thing to delve into. That's not about the kid.
Yes.
And there's so many reasons for wanting it on. One is to diminish the sensory impact of sometimes the overhead lighting and things like that. It's also, I know it's small, but it's that perceived sense of an extra barrier, because if you can see the rim of the hat, it's almost like extending your bubble. But then there's proprioceptive differences there as well. So they might actually need to feel something on their head. Maybe they also need to sit on their foot. I know that I like to do that, but there are reasons why they would be doing that, So I don't care if my students wear hats indoors. That's an easy accommodation. Having access to their belongings at all times. Now, again, I know that it's standard practice for a lot of teachers and schools to have the bag hooks outside the classroom. For so many neurodivergent, particularly autistic students, being separated from their belongings actually just plays on them so much. And it's like, I know that my XYZ is in my bag, but it's not that I need to have it out, but I need it near me. So for some of them, like being able to put their backpack on the back of their chair or have it at their feet under the desk or whatever it is, but having their belongings near them is actually an accommodation that they need to be able to not be distressed about it and therefore to engage in the work. And the whole point of anything at school is I need to do what I need to do to be able to teach you, to get you to engage in learning. If you're not engaged in the learning because you're worried about your Pokemon cards that are in the front pocket of your bag that's outside the room, then you're not learning and I can't do my job. So I don't care. Bring the backpack in. Let's put it in the corner. Let's hang it on the back of the chair. Doesn't matter. As I say, use of the alternative bathroom if it's needed, sunglasses if they're needed, alternative uniform items, so a number of different materials might feel scratchy or uncomfortable or whatever. It doesn't matter. Wear something different. And even in terms of branding, a lot of school branded items with the logo are expensive. And even at the uniform shop, they'll say, oh, just go down to Kmart, Best and Less, whatever, and get something in a similar color, that doesn't have the logo on. That's fine. You do what works. This is a big one, a quiet space for all break times. Now, I know as well as anyone that in schools, teachers, we don't get any downtime, because we have to be at school early. There's often before school meetings, but even if there's not, we've got to be at school early, prepare the resources, prepare the room, get everything happening, reply to emails that we got from the night before or early in the morning. There's things to do. And then the kids are there. And then maybe I'm on recess duty, so I've got to be out there, So it's hard to offer a quiet space. Now, some schools will do that by saying, okay, we have the library open and kids can go in there. but a lot of the time the library position might only be part-time. And it's not reasonable to expect the library teacher to be on duty for recess and lunch 5 days a week. So it's really about staffing. How do we make sure someone's on duty in these spaces? But it can still be done, even if you have to be in the general population. It could be as simple as, having cones out and going, this side of the oval is for quiet play, this side of the oval is for ball sports, or the asphalt is for this and the grass is for this. But cordoning off an area with enough distance between it to be able to go, those kids who struggle with being out there with the shrieking and the noise and that, like, I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's just the noise of children being children. And for some of our children who are so sensitive to that, that is not a break. That is an assault on the senses. And then they're expected to go back into the classroom and get on with work when they are actually so tense and distressed from the quote unquote break that they just had, so they need and deserve access to somewhere quiet, whether it is a separate room like a library or whether it is a separate area of the playground. A lot of schools will also have the same sort of school hall where they have it's kind of like a garage door sort of thing, so it folds up on itself. Even if they were to fold that whole door open so that anyone in the hall is visible by the teacher who's on duty, and say, well, the hall is the quiet space. You can do colouring, you can do board games, you can do, you can sit down with your friend and have a conversation in there, whatever. But if you want to play a loud game or a chasing game or a ball game or whatever, that happens outside. But it's really important to know that those breaks are not breaks for so many of our students. They're actually more distressing than being in the classroom.
Yeah. And definitely,
you can see
so many things.
yeah. And I mean, I'm happy to send you guys these slides, and you can, I guess, push them out to people or put a link where the podcast is or something. Yeah. I'm not super techie, but something to make them available to people, because they're just, they're such easy accommodations, but really they should be standard practice, in my opinion, in every classroom. There's no reason for them not to be.
Yeah. We would, love to be able to link any resources you've got. We can add them to the bio in the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of our time. So I think that's, there's so many other pieces, and we'll get you back. Don't you worry.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I can just squeeze in one last little thing, since we've been on the topic of schools and accommodations and learning adjustments and things, is that, like I said, in an ideal world, I would love it if these adjustments were available for everybody. But realistically, at the moment, they aren't. So I would love for parents and carers to know that your child does not require a formal diagnosis in order to access reasonable adjustments. So it's actually, it's part of the Disability Standards for Education 2005, which, as I said, is nationwide. And it's the language that they use is an imputed disability. Okay, so that's under the page that says, who does this policy apply to? It's down there as, I think, letter G or something like that. It's, these people, these people, these people, these people, and people with an imputed disability. So if you as a parent or carer, or a teacher has, or, hopefully both, because there should be collaboration and communication. But if we have a reasonable basis for an assumption that there is something going on for that person, perhaps they're on the very, 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 very long wait list for assessment, that kind of thing, an imputed disability is grounds enough to access reasonable adjustments.
So important to know. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
And I honestly, I also think I need to say that I think one of the biggest challenges that I see for teachers in being able to put adjustments in place is their own overwhelm and their overload, and that, they're working so hard and there's so many demands on them, and they're just trying to get the curriculum done. They're just trying to teach the kids, and they're, like, every day is hard and full of complexities and challenges. And what I'm hearing when I hear you talk, Charnee, is that actually global adjustments make that easier. Like global adjustments to the entire classroom change the workload. The workload comes when we're trying to constantly differentiate and offer individual accommodations. That's harder. That takes more executive functioning, more thinking. It takes a greater mental load for the teachers. So actually what we're talking about here, although it feels like another task or another ask of teachers, it's actually a way that teachers can reduce their workload.
Yeah,
I really
100%.
hear that. I really believe that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. A lot of the time when I'm doing professional development sessions with teachers, it's like, Charnee, come on, like, you're a teacher. I've got so much other stuff to do. Like, if I can't do behavior charts, what can I do? If I can't do this, what am I supposed to do? It's going to make the workload so much worse. And I'm going, no. It will be hard for you, and maybe an adjustment for the kids initially, particularly if you're doing it like partway through the year or something. But it will be an adjustment for you for maybe a month. And after that, you will find life is so much easier because you're not having as many spot fires to put out. You're not having to have that mental load of, oh gosh, yeah, we're going to assembly. I can't forget that, so-and-so needs this, or, like allow and empower these children to accommodate themselves. And what's beautiful about it is if we model it and it's accessible to everyone, and it's just not a big deal, and we haven't othered these students who have these accommodations, not only will they often accommodate themselves, but actually you'll see them accommodating each other. Because if I've forgotten to bring the sensory tub or whatever to assembly, a kid, without saying anything, will sometimes, oh, miss, you've forgotten the sensory tub, I'll just go grab it. Oh, thank you so much. Because they know that little Johnny needs to have whatever is in there, So we actually see them starting to be the kinds of people who, even if it's not for them, will recognize the importance of it to other people. And we start to see citizens, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I'd love to know where, if people can find you to book in for a webinar or some training, if there's any teachers listening that would like to, learn some more.
Yeah, sure. So my website is, it's a mouthful, but it's Neurodivergent Educator, all one word, .com.au. But it will redirect if you just type in ndeducator.com.au. It will also direct you to there. You can also find me on socials, so Facebook, because I'm a dinosaur, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So yeah, feel free to look me up.
Fantastic. We'll pop some links in too.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So appreciated.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much. For more information on today's conversation and guest, head to the links provided in the description. Please like and subscribe to keep up to date with more content, and it helps us out with the algorithm too. Beyond the Neurotype is not a licensed medical or mental health service, and any information or advice given is general in nature. Please seek professional help if anything mentioned in today's episode has raised questions or concerns.